Okay, so we are going to move on to the next question. And bear in mind, and I want to also make clear with leaving this forum, we are collecting data. We don't know totally what's going to come out of it yet, but I'm certain that something good will come out of it, because collectively with all of these minds, we will see a framework, I think, much. I really do. The next question that we're looking at is, based on your experience, research, and perceptions. Well, I'm not going to read the total question. We're going now to specialized KM areas or roles, the competencies around them. And this might be, when you look at it, now, when we're dealing in knowledge management, what are some of the things we do? We have to learn to identify the knowledge. We have to learn to capture the knowledge. We have COPs. We have knowledge repositories. We have all of these components. And in most cases, we don't have all of them in one place, but we do know that they take different competencies. Even earlier when someone said communications, I know that on the teams that I run, I also have a full-time communications person, because the bottom line is, if someone doesn't understand that once you capture it, you've got to do something to make it available so that it can be used, or else it dies on the vine. And those positions have to be there to ensure that that happens. So think about the positions that you deal with and what competencies they need to do the knowledge activity that they're doing, whether it's COPs, whether it's setting up a portal, whether it's technology, whether it is communicating. There are some things that they need to do. So think about those specialties and see what competencies we need in order to do knowledge work. Does that make sense? Okay.
I'll start on this one. Into knowledge management, we actually have a head start, kind of gone a little bit farther on this than practice. And the reason I'm saying this, because we actually are able to identify several problems that researchers were able to work on, and they are working on. And one of those areas, for example, is knowledge discovery. There has been a lot of work done on knowledge discovery, because the problem is that we're generating way too much information, we're generating way too much data. There's a lot of data being generated. Even the government came up with the grants and money for people to deal with that problem, in recognition of the size of the problem that we're going to have. And I think the researchers are tackling that issue of a clear problem. We have too much data. We could mine that data, we can make use of it, and that sort of thing, and the issue of how to manage it in the long term, how to deal with it, how to preserve it. So there are several clear problems that researchers are trying to tackle in this case. We also know some problems, like we can recognize knowledge sharing is a problem, and we need to do something, and we can tackle that problem. We know things like knowledge retention is a problem, and we might need to find ways to tackle those issues. So as far as research concerned, I think I would say we are doing okay, and there's a lot of knowledge management research going on as well. We're not as far in practice as in research on those issues. And I think that the difficulty also comes from the fact that in knowledge management program, when we try to train students and educate them, well, there are certain things that we can educate and train. I can teach people how to swim and how to ride a bicycle, and I devise a program to do that. But I'm not sure whether I can come up with anything that change person from has no vision to become a person with a vision. it's kind of, this is something some people sometimes born. Leadership, what Michael said just now, as a being sometimes confused as a competency. A lot of people argue that you either born leader or not. They cannot make you a leader, no matter how long I train you. So there are certain things that it's difficult, but there are certain things that born out of problems, and if they are born out of problem, which is like any other profession is, because most of professions and most of disciplines, they kind of wrap around the problem. And if we are able to identify the problems, I think we can identify the profession and we identify the discipline as well. We can teach people, if I know what is exactly the problem, I can devise a program to solve that problem. So I think we are making a little bit, I'm going to say making progress on the research, but I'm not quite sure how far we're going with the practice.
Jim Lee from APQC. One of the frameworks I found useful in either communicating with knowledge professionals or helping them is the original Nanaka model, the SECI, socialize, externalize, combine, and internalize. And if you take a look at each of those 4 quadrants, they require you to do different things. And by breaking it out into those 4 things, you might be able to tease out some of the competencies you need. You certainly can tease out different techniques at the very least. So when you're talking about internalize, tacit to tacit, it's a different kind of thing you need to be able to do than when you're doing things like externalize, which simply takes tacit to explicit, for example. So with that simple 2x2, I'm able to help people devise systems, whether they're people or other enablers, so they can at least see there's differences between this entire knowledge flow cycle.
Dr. Green. Yeah. Oh, we're not talking about the executive level anymore, right?
No, we're at the KM special.
Okay, so when I think about it, for me and the work that we do, I would think of people who are well-grounded in communities of practice. How do you help establish those communities? How do you help support them? How do you help make them functional? Coaching and supporting them, and then how do you assess the effectiveness of those communities to deliver business results? I think those are key aspects of communities. Best practice replication. I want somebody who knows about what it means to replicate best practices and what kind of systems and methodologies are out there to do that, everything from the very simple to more complex depending on what the business need requires. I want people who know about lessons learned and after-action reviews. How does the organization learn and use that knowledge to the benefit of the organization? So I expect them to be well-grounded in how to do that easily, how to create the information architecture behind it so that the documents and information you create are actually usable, retrievable, and that information can become actionable. Knowledge retention and transfer. We've identified about 3 ways that we use to do this particular process, and I'd like to see people who are well-grounded in that particular approach. And then collaboration technologies, using live meeting, MOC, Yammer, using the various tools that are out there to help people connect one to another and share what they know. But this information management piece, I really like them to know about how are content storage systems built. What is a taxonomy? How do we use effective taxonomies to help people retrieve information? I can tell you an anecdotal story where we paid $3 million for seismic data that we had paid to collect previously because we couldn't find it. That is horrible, right? But that is a good example of just a business impact of not having a good information management system, or perhaps the changeover between owners or where the system was placed. These things have huge impact, and if I had people who had these 6 areas, had some good grounding in these 6 areas, I could probably capture the world. Right?
Let me push the red button and agree with Ed. And we could probably contribute the George Washington University background on this. When we started the actual teaching of these programs back in 2000, one of the things that we evolved was what we call an 8-step approach to how do you tie what ultimately is a knowledge system architecture and activities to the business. Over time, we found that some of the private corporations had 10-step approaches. There's a book on tools that I was asked to use to teach in Lockheed Martin that had 10 steps. One of the senior managers and I went into a debate over that, and I conceded to her that, okay, let's do your 12 steps, but let's add it to the 8 steps and the 10 steps. So it's actually systems doing it again. It's actually very mundane sounding, but it really ties into all of the things relative to the way Ed expressed what you really are looking for from the people. The processes are good, systems engineering, good input-output process, feedback, evaluation, validation before putting it into an accessible database for people. It's differentiating between tacit, implicit, and explicit knowledge and who the users are and what they do with it. So we'll be able, I think, just to go back into some of our history and contribute some actual documented paperwork.
Now, I was waiting to make a comment. You got me started to think about it because you were using the word problems. And then you got really serious down my path when you started actually defining 5 or 6 of those problems. Now, some of you that saw my webinar know that in my class I talk about large strategic initiatives, and I call them BOLs, and little teeny initiatives that are quick wins that are part of your change management effort, and I call them squirrels. Well, you don't need to call them bulls and squirrels. Problems, or the things that you define, I don't know what you have for labels for them, but I think KM is comprised of, in my own estimation right now, subject to being enriched, about 15 of those kinds of problems, depending on how granular you want to be. But major problems that require strategic initiatives, that require funding and staffing and project management, there's quite a number of them. And no one person could do all 15 at the same time. I wouldn't expect anybody to have competencies in all 15. I would expect your leader to be aware of all of them, to know which ones are the most appropriate for my organization, to be able to justify them, get the funding for them, and then hire a person or more who are quite expert at whatever one of those bulls are or those problems are. Then back to the SECI model. I love it. I teach it all the time in the class. But in the SECI model, you might have some bulls, but you also have an opportunity for some very small squirrels. Take the tacit to tacit. Teaching people a little bit better presentation skills. Tacit to tacit is in a meeting. A little bit better meeting management. A little bit better brainstorming techniques. These things are not strategic, but they're part of knowledge management. So that's my little 2 cents on that. But both of you, thanks for those comments.